In my last blog post, I demonstrated how I create joinery quickly using some different extensions. And a good friend of mine suggested that maybe I should do a video showing how to create similar joinery without any extensions. And so I'm going to do that with this table and put in some mortise and tenon joints and some dovetails. Hopefully you'll get the idea. Before I get started, I want to just show you something here because this will come into play when I'm modeling here. In Preferences, Shortcuts, if I search for Hide or filter for Hide Rest of Model, you can see that I have the H key set as my keyboard shortcut for hiding the rest of the model. This is really useful to have a keyboard shortcut, and I highly recommend you do that. And you'll see how that's going to work out here shortly. Anyway, all right, let's get on with it. So I've already given tags, in the old days these would be layers, to the different kinds of parts. I'm going to hide the things we don't want here. So in this case, I just want to have my aprons and legs. Actually, I don't even need the legs. We could get rid of those and leave just the aprons. Yeah, let's do that. All right, and we'll come back to the legs here shortly, but we might as well go ahead and model the joinery, the tenons and the dovetails for this top rail. And I'm going to start by opening the side apron, and I already have that keyboard shortcut activated. If I hit it again, you can see those things come back, but I don't want those in my way right now. All right, so, and I am using keyboard shortcuts for some of these tools, so I'm going to start with offset, and due to the small size of the apron here, we'll make that a 1/4 inch shoulder, and then I'm going to pull this out. Let's come out 1 inch. I'm also going to push this down. Let's go down 3/8. Yeah, that probably will work. Actually, now I can check this. What I don't want to do is have a conflict here. No, I want to go down another 1/4 inch. There we go. I don't want to have a conflict with the dovetail joint that's going to be there, so we'll do that. But now, on the back here, I can switch back to offset, double click, I get the same amount of offset, and this I'm going to pull out to 1, and then we'll switch out of that, and notice that my both side aprons have the same thing going on there. Let's open the back apron and double click and push pull. Come on, out you come. There we go. Now you can see that I'm going to have a conflict here. I'll take care of that in a moment, but I might as well do the other end first. And what I'm going to do, and of course normally we would have a little bit more space here, but I'm just going to move that edge in on the end of my tenon by the width of the, or thickness of the other tenon. And just make sure I'm going in the red direction there. And now we'll open this one up, and there's a couple of ways we can do this, but I'm just going to go ahead and use move again. And you see that one's done as well. All right, so those 3 pieces are done. We'll do our bottom rail first. This one, I think, due to the small size of this, I'll do the same offset, but I'm inclined to, yeah, I think it'll be all right. We'll just leave it. And this one, I'm just going to bring it out 3/4 of an inch. So it's going to collide with the other tenon, but that's all. I'm not going to do a miter, partial miter at the end or anything like that. So double click, push pull, and that's done. Now, the top one, I'm going to go ahead and just double click to make this thing longer, basically by the same amount. And I'm going to come back here and is that where I want that? Let's turn on our legs again and compare. No, that's not where I want that. We'll do 3/4 inch. All right. We'll be fine. And in this case, I'm going to, as I lay this out, I'm going to go ahead and say, some of this I'm kind of eyeballing as I go along here. Yeah, I think we'll do 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to use, so that's going to make the end of my dovetail 3/4 of an inch wide, and then I'm just going to use 8 degrees for my dovetail angle. And for this, I'm going to drag along there and there. And now to make the other half of this joint, since it's symmetrical, I've selected those edges. Q for the rotate tool, and I'm going to hit the right cursor key so I can stand that up on the red axis. And I'm right on that center. And I'll activate my copy function. And now I can push that down. And you can see it shows me that it's limited to the 3/4 of an inch. And that's fine. All right. Now I'm going to, I could go down and lay out the joint on the other end, but instead of doing that, I am going to go ahead and edit my component, my leg component first. So now let's look at this. Here I've got 4 leg components. They're all identical, but I'm going to do different things to them. So before I cut the joinery for the 2 front rails and the back apron, I am going to do the mortise for the side aprons because all 4 legs get effectively the same treatment. So for this, I'm going to switch to X-ray, and I've got the styles toolbar up here, and I'm going to open the leg for editing, and let's see if we can make this a little easier for you to see. Hopefully this will work. Let's go in here and we'll go to face style. I'm going to make transparency quality nicer. Oh yeah, that helps a bit. So hopefully you can see that the shoulder of the tenon is shown there. And if I take the rectangle tool and trace it, now let me get rid of the rest of the model for a moment. You can see I've drawn that rectangle in there. And now, if you're paying attention, you'll notice, or you'll remember that my tenons on the front and the tenons on the back aren't the same, and that's all right. I'll deal with that shortly. But let's bring our model back, and I'm going to just use push-pull on that face and push that in. I'll hide that again and get out of X-ray, and you can see I now have a mortise there. And of course I have the mortise, whoops, I have the mortise in all 4 legs. And of course, these two back legs, the mortise doesn't actually fit, or the tenon doesn't fit in the mortise. That was what I was getting at a moment ago. But again, I'll deal with that shortly. At least most of my work is done there, so that's really a nice thing. I just have to make my mortise another 5/8 of an inch taller. No big deal. All right, so I'm going to select the two back legs, and let's make them unique. And then I'm going to call those tapered leg rear, and because I can and I'm thinking about it, I'll call those tapered leg front. All right, let's go ahead and we'll just do the joinery here. And I'm still working in X-ray here, and I'm looking through my aprons, and you can see that now that mortise fits. Use R for the rectangle tool, and we will create the mortise there. This one I only need to come to here, and I'm all the way through. Perfect. In fact, let's check it to make sure the face got removed. Yep. So I can do a little cleanup in here. Get rid of that edge and that edge. That's just nitpicky stuff, but I don't like to leave that kind of stuff if I can avoid it. All right, my back legs are done. Now the front legs are going to take a little bit more. Let's do the dovetail first, just because it's up on top. We'll bring back our apron here, or this front rail. And so I can trace what I've already done, so I don't have to do any layout for that. And then use push-pull to push that down. And again, if I get rid of my model, you can see the dovetail in there. And of course, the other front leg has the same treatment. So while we're thinking about this dovetail, I'll go ahead, bring this back. So now, without really doing any layout, I can get this end of the rail cut. Now, for the little mortise, of course, we're going to go back to X-ray and open the leg for editing and rectangle tool and push through. There is that little edge there. We can get rid of that one. By the way, the eraser tool only works on edges, so I can erase those edges right through the faces, which is kind of handy. All right, so that's all the joinery needed to join those pieces. Let's get out of X-ray. We don't need our style thing anymore. So let's do the drawer next. So I'm going to get rid of everything else. So I've got the drawer, and there's a couple of ways to attack these dovetails. I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to start with a rectangle, and I'm going to put one over the ends of the drawer front and drawer back. And I'm going to turn off my drawer tag so I can lay these things out here. And let's start with this one. And what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to find the midpoint. And I'm using the protractor tool here. And I'm just going to set a guideline at the 8-degree angle. And I'm going to select that thing and move it down. I'm going to make my pins a 1/4 inch wide, and so I'm going to move that down 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to, instead of figuring out where the other one needs to be, I'm going to go ahead and just do a rotate copy. So I'm around the midpoint there. I copy that guideline up like so. Now I'll trace my guidelines, and I'm finished with the guides, so we can get rid of those. Actually, let's do this one first, since we can see up there to the top. I'm going to make my half pins a 1/4 inch wide as well. So what I'm going to do is select just that edge, copy that up, and you notice where I started. So I was a 1/4 inch up from the line I was copying, which means that this ends up being a 1/4 of an inch wide. If you can see the entity info on the right, you see that's a 1/4 inch. So I don't need to do any measuring. We'll do the same thing down here. And now I'm going to select the faces and delete those because I don't want those. I just want the edges, so you can see that there's no faces in there. And I'll do this from the edit menu. I'm going to cut. I'll do that with a keyboard shortcut normally. Let's bring the drawers back, and I'm going to do the drawer back first. And we can hide the rest of the model. And now I'll use edit, paste in place, keyboard shortcut for that setup. And now while that's all selected still, I'm going to go ahead and copy those edges down to the opposite end of my drawer back. Now I can push that in the thickness of my drawer sides, which is a 1/2 inch in this case. Orbit to the opposite end and do the same thing. And that's done. Now I'll open the drawer side for editing, and I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut this time. And in this case, I don't need that edge or that edge. What I need to do now is double click, and I get my joinery for that. So the back of the drawer is joined to the sides. Now let's get rid of this thing again. And I'm going to do basically the same thing. So I just have to remember which direction to work. So in this case, I'm going to come up this way. And I'll make that come down the 1/8 of an inch. And it kind of feels like it snaps there. It wants to just do that because that was the last move distance that I used. Q, green, so the left cursor key, and we'll copy that up. Line tool, and do that. And let's see. This time, I think, trying to decide how many pins, because I haven't really decided on that. I think for this, because I've got more joinery anyway, I'm going to do this one differently. So I copied from the midpoint up. And let's see, what do we think of that? Yeah, I think that'll work. All right. And I don't really need that one, but it was just easier to select that all. So we'll do the same thing going the other direction. And you could do whatever you want as far as your dovetail layout. It doesn't have to be symmetrical like this, but that's easy to lay out in an array. So I'm going to just select all those faces and delete them again. I'm done with my guides, so get rid of those. This time, Control X, turn on the drawer, open the drawer front for editing. Let's get where we can see the other end of this. Keyboard shortcut for paste in place. And copy those edges down there. And then there's going to be some lines to delete here. Suppose you could leave them and make it look like the marking knife lines that you'd get in if you were hand cutting, but that seems a little sloppy to me. All right, go down to the other end and do that, and then our eraser, and just erase the edges that we don't need. All right, and we just have the front of the drawer side to do, so I've double-clicked to open that for editing. Paste the same thing in place. Double-click each one of these. Remember that push-pull remembers the last push-pull distance. There we go. So now the only thing left is, let's bring this back, is the groove for the bottom. So I just traced the edge of my bottom here. I'm going to hide this. And I'm going to go ahead and push that. Now here it only wants to go that far because it runs into that next face, but that's okay. We just start the push-pull again. And there's that. On this side, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So let's bring this back for a moment. And I'm going to start with a rectangle right there. And I'm going to orbit up to the top side. You see if I came up here farther, I'm drawing that rectangle right on the surface, but I'm going to bring it to there. Now I can hide the rest of my model, and I can push that in 1/4 of an inch. And if I hide my drawer side for a moment, you can see that that now fits. And we'll edit, unhide the last. I didn't do any of that, the kickers and runners for this table, so there's nothing to do there. But that is basically the extent of the joinery for this little table. Hopefully it looks easy enough and you can make something out of that. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know.